Welcome to the Joy and Goal Setting Podcast, where we empower individuals to discover their purpose, achieve their goals, and experience a joyful life through encouraging conversation. I'm your host, Hudson Dotts. Today, we're sitting down with Lee Cohen. Lee is a father, husband, and the president of the Charleston Battery. We're going to discuss how to find balance, the role of mentorship, and the world of professional sports. What are some of the goals when you first got into the Battery? What are some goals you had, short term and kind of long term?
Yeah.
Some successes you've had in those goals and why you chose those goals.
Yeah. I think the first goal was to just make it fun again for everybody.
Smiles.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because when I started doing, the site visits in June and July last year, there was not a lot of smiles.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot of smiles within the organization. There's not a lot of smiles in the fan base. And there was no smiles on the field. And, I think as a leader, you try and bring joy to an organization. And if you can come in every single day with a smile on your face, then you're automatically changing the perception of everybody within the office.
Yeah.
And that's easy to do, right?
Right.
You don't have to win.
There's like I tell my kids, there's no athleticism in being respectful.
Yeah.
You don't have to be athletic. You don't have to be good at sports. It's the same thing. You have to be good at your job to smile, but you can smile.
Correct. You be positive. You can bring energy. And so those were some of the early short-term goals when you walk in, because I didn't know at that point in time who the head coach was going to be.
Right.
I knew Rob through the league office, but it's different when you're with somebody day to day.
Yeah.
And I knew nobody in the front office in general. So it's like, all right, here's the new guy that's coming in.
What's it going to be like?
He's been in Tampa.
Right.
They've won there. They've been successful.
Yep.
He's now, is he going to just completely change the organization up from day one? And it was, I would say, very refreshing to walk in, because you walk in with a mindset of, you're going to teach me. I'm the new guy that's coming in.
Tell me what things are like. What do I do? What's Monday look like? Yeah.
Yeah, and try and build off. I think the one thing that the Battery did really, really well in retrospect to, the lack of success on the field was they created an environment inside that stadium.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so different. It's very Charleston related.
Yeah.
And it's very unique. And somebody who's just went to Chelsea and caught a game in there, the experience outside the pitch is actually very good, right? The bands before the game.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
The food, the camaraderie. It's a very social atmosphere.
It's very Charleston-esque, right? Yeah.
It just wasn't that way on the field. So it's like, all right, you guys are actually really, really good at this.
Yeah.
Let's continue to take it from this and go to the next level.
Right.
And let's understand, how do we go from 1,500 people to 2,500 people to 3,500 people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting. It's almost been about a year since my first game. Very, very close. And I walked in at the very first day, we had a game coming up within 2 weeks. And I looked at them and I said, I'm going to break the stadium. And they all looked at me like,
what do you mean?
why?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
And I said, because if I don't break the stadium now, I don't know how we fix it going forward. And I said, we are going to try and put as many people in that building, and we're going to put us all under pressure, and we're going to see where we crack.
Mm-hmm.
So that when we go into 2023,
we're ready. Yeah.
And that was great. I mean, it was a great experience. You got to see the group kind of work together.
Yeah.
But I think the thing for me is I was down there with them.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the trenches with them. And I understood that process of what it took So they knew, I had to get their respect.
Right. And go do it.
Correct.
Be there.
And so they knew from the beginning I was going to have their back, and I was going to be in there with them from day one with it. And so you set up the off season of how do we grow? What are the goals from there? And the first was to find someone that I could work with on an everyday basis with the head coach. Mm-hmm. It's very easy in life in general to win. Very easy. It's very hard to lose.
Yeah.
And to lose with somebody you want to lose with.
Mm-hmm.
And you can win with anybody, but can you lose with someone?
Yeah, it's good.
And that, to me, was what I looked for in the characteristics of someone. I didn't care how much they knew about soccer.
Right.
I didn't care what their formation wanted to be. I wanted to know, was I going to connect with that person on and off the field so that we could make this club that's been around since 1993 relevant again.
Right.
And that was kind of task one, and that was step one. And it was a process. There was a lot of candidates that we went through, a lot of phone calls, a lot of hours, but it actually worked out well because I was commuting back and forth from here to Tampa.
Yep.
So I was by myself, and so I took advantage of the of the downtime.
All the time.
Yeah. But it was great. I mean, Ben's personality, who you've gotten to know, and he's very different than most because he's just singular focused on what's in front of him and winning that game and being the best coach he can be. But he genuinely is somebody who's like good human being, great to be around. And I think one of the things I've learned most is like somebody that you can lose with every single day, knowing that when things aren't good, we can work together to get out.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about winning and losing, and really to me, I think about that translates into like values. Like y'all have similar values. Like the ability to lose. You can win, and you say easy win. We know that's not necessarily true, but there are coaches and there are managers and there are even players that can find a way to win.
Yeah.
But when they lose, if y'all's values aren't aligned, the losing continues.
Yeah.
And then they no longer can find a way to win.
Yeah.
Right. And what is that about? And I think it's aligning of values, aligning of purpose, aligning of who you are.
Yeah.
And that's where you see camaraderie, teamwork, respect, all those things move the team forward. Because inevitably over the course of a season, there's going to be droughts.
Correct.
There's going to be tough times, losses you shouldn't lose, all
Correct.
those kinds of things. And then how do you grow from there?
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're talking about. And we talk a lot about growth mindset of let's put you under pressure and let's crack.
Yeah.
And that within itself as a manager is people are going to fail then.
Correct.
But you're expecting them to fail. So as a manager, you have two options, like get angry, why did we fail? And you're the problem. Or we failed, now what do we do?
Yeah.
How do we get better as both people and as an organization?
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, right? Like you and I have had this conversation. My brother's someone that's inspired me, had a mindset of fail and fail fast.
Yep.
Rob, when I was going through the interview process, fail and fail fast.
Mm-hmm.
I know you guys are big, right? Fail and fail fast, learn from it and grow.
Yeah.
And I think that's how if you can it's not really fail is the word. You're not really failing in that sense. You're learning and growing so that you don't make the same mistakes. If you make the same mistakes over and over again, if we lose 6 games in a row,
that's failure.
That's failure, right? Losing one,
we haven't learned from it.
Losing one and figuring out how do we not do that again, or having a bad game day experience and not replicating it again from a fan's perspective.
Right.
Those are learning lessons. And I think that's the biggest thing we're trying to teach everybody, whether it's the head coach or the front office staff, is learn from those things. So that way when it's unique, we get to repeat and do it again next Saturday.
Yeah, right. You get another try.
Yeah, we get another try. So let's
try.
learn from it so our next try is better, because the way American sports are set up, there will be a playoff at some point.
And we'll make it, hopefully, most of the time.
Hopefully.
You don't get relegated.
You don't get to retry the next time.
That's right.
So you take 32 weeks worth of...
To prepare for that moment.
Prepare for that moment.
Yeah.
And whether that's Ben as the head coach or Garrett as the operations person, it's those moments over those 32 weeks you're preparing for that one game or 4 games when it's do or die at that point.
Let's walk it back. How did you end up as the president of the Battery? And I know you mentioned Tampa, but let's go even further back.
Yeah.
Like bring us into how you got here.
So I thought I wanted to be a psychologist when I was graduating high school.
I didn't know this.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting story. That was probably my first mistake. Fail and fail fast.
Fail and fail fast. You fail quickly.
I went away to school to University of Central Florida, went there for a semester, wasn't for me, ended up coming back home. And my dad, who's very influential in my life, was like, everything happens in life for a reason. And you don't know why it happens, but it happens and you may never know, but don't look for that reason. Just take what life has given you and go with it from there. And so I came back, and it's ironic. I became extremely close with my brother at that point in time, and I ended up meeting my future wife. And so
had you stayed, those things wouldn't have happened.
Correct, right? And so from there, finished up at a community college and then went to Flagler College for sport management. My dad was like, why are you doing anything outside of sports? Like, this is what you love.
This is your passion? Go for it.
Go for it. And sport management in early 2000s was still such a new degree to go after.
Right.
And so I went to Flagler College, entered as a junior, and it was really weird, right? Like, I never really golfed. And somehow in my sport intro class, we were hosting a golf tournament. Like, I was the new student that was coming in as a junior, and everybody else was like all around.
Right.
Didn't know anybody. And somehow everyone looked at me and was like, why don't you run the golf tournament?
Because I don't know anything about anything.
I don't know anything, and I don't know anyone either.
Right.
I was like, sure, let's go for it. And it was ironic. I ran the golf tournament. I was like, wow, this is awesome. Like, I love being in operations. I love kind of putting together things. I love the thrill of you're working towards something, you get that high, you can come off of it and then do it again. Right. And so I was in. I was like 2 feet in at that point. Did a few different internships throughout the course of my time at Flagler. And then I was not a soccer player. I didn't grow up watching the sport. I grew up a baseball guy. But somehow this is where life was taking me. So I needed one internship to graduate. Ended up at the USL league office. Right. And I was the intern in the PDL, which is considered 4th division soccer in this country. It went great. I learned a lot. And I came back from the end of that internship and ended up, this was like in August, I helped out for a few different events they had to kind of finish out the year. And then they offered me full-time employment in January of 2006, it would have been. Come on as the assistant director of the PDL. The gentleman who was there had been there for 10 years. And in 2006, like, the housing boom was unbelievable. Yep. His dad was in the tile industry. And he said in April, the season started in May, I'm leaving. I'm out.
I'm done.
I'm out. And I'm 23 at the time.
But you haven't taught me anything yet.
No.
Right.
And I'll never forget, mentor of mine who was the president of USL gave me the opportunity. He's like, listen, we're going to give you this opportunity. And he said, wear down my rug. And I was like, I don't know what that means. And what it meant was my office was on one end of the building and his office was on the other end of the building. And that pathway was always open for me to him to make sure that he was going to help me through whatever I needed to get through that year. Awesome. And so that's like you in life, right? You look at different moments that you've had and you say, okay, and this is a big thing I've always said, if I ever get my chance, I'm going to do it my way. But I got to make sure I do it my way. Don't just say those things. Then when you get the chance, be completely different. Right. And so I've always had that policy with anybody in the organization. Like, door's always open. Yeah. And wear down that rug because it's my job to help you get the most out of it. So I was at USL for 4 years. And I just didn't get that, like, instant high, we'll call it. Yeah. Of being on the league side. I wanted to be on the team side. I wanted to feel the rewards of the work that we do. The league side's great. But, like, you're so distant.
Yeah, and for you, it sounds like those highs. I mean, we talk about, like, there is, like, the event. We can call it a game. You can call it a, golf term, whatever. It's the high is like the pursuit of it happening, right? And, like, you're doing all the things you're pursuing. And then, like you said, it happens. The down is like, well, it's over. Now what do I pursue? Yeah. In the league office, I doubt there's those kinds of, like, big milestone goals. You're, like, pushing forward. It's kind of like, well, tomorrow's kind of like today a little bit, like, which is, it is. When you're pursuing a goal is a little bit different, right?
Yeah. And so I stepped away from the league side, and the Tampa Bay Rowdies were coming back into rebirth in 2010, and it was awesome. Like, I've told this story. I think I've told it to you before, but it's, like, great. Like, where soccer was in 2010 to where it is now in 2023. Like, my interview was at a like an international house of pancakes. That's where, like, I met for my interview.
This is as much as we can pay, buddy.
Yeah, it was called the Village Inn, and it was unique. I'll never forget the gentleman was Perry Vanderbeck, who was an American soccer legend. He was the general manager at the time of the Tampa Bay Rowdies. And when we leave the interview, he looks at me and he says, "Oh, is that your truck?" I was like, "Yeah." He said, "Great. Why don't you meet us at practice the first day?" And I was brought on to be the director of operations, stadium operations. And I showed up the first day. He's like, listen, he's like, we don't have an equipment manager. We don't have a soccer operations person.
So welcome.
So like, welcome.
Here's your 17 hats.
Yeah, I thought, man, I negotiated that deal bad on my half. They didn't tell me all these things.
Right, of course.
And but what it was really good is I got to see these from the ground up. Mm-hmm. And I got to see what that organization...
Learn how it truly operates, what it really takes to make things happen.
Exactly. Yeah. So as time progressed, ownership changed, and a new owner came on board in 2014. And he said to me, he said, where's all the employees? And he's like, we need 8 or 9. So it was great. So we went from like 7 of us
right.
to 20 of us.
And
really,
actual
really
staff.
Quick.
Yeah.
And the part that made it really special for me is I got to see everyone, through like all those different positions. Mm-hmm. So when we were hiring them, very easy as a leader.
You knew exactly what they needed.
Yeah. And it was very easy as a leader to say, like, I've done that before. Right. So I know what it's like. Here's how we can do it.
Right.
I think the hardest part is to let them learn and do their ways.
And you're like, trust me, I know how to do this better. Let me just do it.
Yeah.
It's hard to be like, oh, okay, fine, fail.
Yeah. And so it was great because that was a really good experience for me to understand is to let go. And then we weren't really good on the field. The owner was extremely passionate at wanting to give us everything we could possibly get. And it doesn't really work out that way, right? Just because you have the most money or just because you have the biggest toys.
That's the Yankees, right?
Exactly. It doesn't always work out. You'll appreciate this. So I was the chief operating officer, and then our general manager had stepped away at the time. So I was then kind of de facto, like, I got to handle some of the contract stuff. The first player I ever signed, Joe Cole.
Yeah, you did.
Which was really, really cool.
Yeah.
For someone in that opportunity.
For a lot of reasons.
Yeah. I mean, he was, right? UK legend.
Yeah.
England national team legend. Chelsea legend.
Yep.
And so it was really, really cool to bring him over here to the United States for his first tour of, and basically finishing out his career. Amazing human being.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely amazing. But that was a pretty cool, like, that was my introduction as to recruitment players and what do we bring.
At that point, you're like, I'm good. I've successfully done it. What else do you need from me?
Correct. We were so bad, though.
It's still terrible.
We were so bad. And then the Tampa Bay Rays purchased the Tampa Bay Rowdies at that point in time. And that, I will call it, is my full, like, growth potential really opened up. And that was all of the years of, I wouldn't do it this way.
Right.
I would do it this way.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it this way. That opportunity came. And so I really got the opportunity to lead a staff. And at that point in time, we had hired Neil Collins to be the head coach of the Tampa Bay Rowdies. And that's when I learned who I want to lose with. Mm-hmm. And who I want to win with and how do we get through things. And it was fantastic. Like, an experience I'd never had before because we hadn't been successful. We had a lot of money on the team side to now we were like, let's be strategic and smart of how we're going to spend. Let's do the Tampa Bay Rays.
You actually can. Right.
And it was great. I mean, 2019, we learned a lot. We went to the playoffs. I think we were like 20 games unbeaten. And it was, so this will correlate to where we're going now. We went 20 games unbeaten. We were like top 2 or 3 all year. And then last 2 or 3 weeks of the regular season, we didn't have the greatest run, and we finished as a 5 seed.
It's not good. You don't want to go into the playoffs.
And so we had to go to Louisville, who is one of the biggest powerhouses in second division soccer history, and we lost in the first round. And we all sat down, and we said, like, that sucked.
Yeah.
All year, it's like our first go at it, and I'll never forget Brian Auld, who is the Rays have 2 presidents. He's one of the presidents. And I sent him a text message, and I said, I guarantee you we won't be back in the same position next year. He's like, you can't guarantee that in sports. I was like, no, I can't.
No, I can.
And we learned. Like, Neil and I got back in. We felt that emotion on Saturday.
Uh-huh.
On Monday morning, we were in figuring out what are we going to do to make this work. And we went to, no one ever taught us what it was going to be like to run a business during the pandemic, let alone a sports team. And we built this entire roster, and we were
And the USL, right? I mean, it's not. I mean, sport teams, of course, all had to figure it out, but your revenue is coming from butts and chairs and
correct.
And
There was
and
no TV deal.
sponsorships.
Great point.
Right.
And so 2020 it's rolling around, and we were actually in New York, and it was a unique experience. First time we had won in the history of the Rowdies in New York. Amazing, right?
Like,
we've finally turned the corner.
Right, the page has been turned. Yeah,
and we get back into Tampa, and Wednesday the NBA decides to shut down.
I'm like, awesome.
And it's like, wait, what? What are we hitting? And we learned a lot. And this is where I'd say I learned a lot from the Rays ownership of be bold, learn, don't hit the easy button. And that whole year, we were the first sports franchise in the state of Florida to open back up. We were the third in the country to open back up with fans in stands.
Figure out how to do it, yeah.
And figure out how to do it. I mean, I was like, nope, let's just play our games. Let's focus on that. And Stu said to us, he said, Stu Sternberg, the owner, said, if you don't learn from it now, like who knows how long this is going to last.
At that point, right, no idea.
We can write 2020 off. We can't write off 2021.
That's right.
So let's learn from it. And it was great. Good experience. We learned a lot. We had 100 fans in for the first game. And we had 100 1-gallon bottles of hand sanitizer.
Every 6 seats?
Every 6 seats. It was
right.
It was crazy. But we learned so much from it. We won the Eastern Conference and went to the final, and then COVID actually caught us. The entire team caught it the week of the final.
Oh my gosh.
That was probably one of the most challenging phone calls I ever had to make, was to the team to let them know that the final would be canceled and we weren't going to play it. And like, you work so hard for that. And you get there. But again, right, next day back in, let's figure out how to get this to the point to where we can get back to that same point. 2021 came around. We were regular season champs. Went all the way to the final again. We get to the final, probably the worst 90 seconds of the year. Like 3 goals within the 90-second window. But what it taught me was, how do we create something that can last over the course of time? So whether I step away, whether Neil steps away, or whether the organization goes in a different direction, can you leave a footprint? And so 2022 comes rolling around, and I step away. 23, Neil steps away, and the club still moves in a different direction. But in 22, when I stepped away, I needed to figure out like how I was going to motivate myself again. Like, I've learned I'm a builder. Yeah. And once the building was built,
the standing's not your deal.
Correct.
It's not my jam either.
Correct. And so it was a lot of, it was great because you've gone through 3 different ownership groups in about 12 years.
Right. I mean, you kind of had 3 different new adventures.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And so it never got old.
Big time. And I think I was looking for someone like Rob. Yeah. That could challenge me and push me and work hand in hand with me on a regular basis. And I had told Rob that I was leaving the Rowdies probably a couple weeks after I'd already left. Or maybe right around that time, like I had left. Maybe I was like, I left the Rowdies. It was great. He's like, well, let's connect in, late June. And we just had a conversation. It was amazing. And we talked not about soccer. He had just went through a life experience with his father, losing his father. I had lost mine in 2012. And so we connected on a very different level. Yeah. And didn't talk about coming to Charleston, didn't talk about what it looks like.
Just connecting as people.
Yeah, it was awesome. And I said, listen, I'm going away for a couple weeks. Let's connect when I get back. Yeah. And got back in middle of July, and I was enjoying the time. I mean, it was
kind of nice to not, right?
I mean, Florida is awesome. Tampa is awesome. Working in outdoor entertainment in June, July, and August, it is not fun. The stresses of
weather, because you know it's going to rain,
and then the impact that has financially on the business. Yeah, right. You got to get the game in. People don't show. Right. If you have to replay the game. Right. If all those costs redoing it again. So I enjoyed last summer like I've never enjoyed before. Yeah. Had great time with the family, and then Rob and I started talking a little bit more, and the conversations led to, well, I'm interested. but like not till November. Where I was like, "Oh, we're interested," but like September.
But like a while ago, right?
So I ended up coming to Charleston last week of July and saw my first Battery game, which is ironic because we had played in Tampa, the Battery, for many years. But I had never been to Charleston because it was the easiest trip to get to.
Right.
And they bust.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, I'm not stopping.
I'm not busting.
So it was great to see I had seen a lot of their games on broadcast. And I always tell Rob, like, it looks absolutely fantastic. I love the suites. I love the kind of ambiance that you have in the background from the broadcast, the bridge.
Yep.
You know, you see all the fans on the drink rails. And then see it live in person. I was like, oh, this is really cool. This is unique. And okay, by the way, Charleston is a pretty cool city.
Pretty cool.
And so we just started our due diligence. And then, come September of last year, September 10th, I was here and, was fully on board. And the first team that we played that night was the Tampa Bay Rowdies.
Oh, was it?
Yep.
I don't remember that game.
And everyone knows how bad the team was last year.
We beat Tampa, though, right?
We did.
Yeah, I remember that.
So it is crazy that
the day you show up?
The day I show up, they beat the Rowdies. And I think they had 5 wins all of last year. And
that was one of them.
That was one of them. And it was, Neil is one of my closest friends, the head coach of the Tampa Bay Rowdies. And it was like one of those, like, can I count that for me?
Right. Did I get that one?
Did I get that one? And then from that point on, it started the process and, of how do we make this club relevant again?
Life for you, obviously, here in Charleston, loving the project, the Battery, seeing a lot of successes, a lot of wins, massively early on.
Yeah.
And it's not just like a kind of like, okay, next step. Like this is kind of like, I would imagine, if you're being honest with yourself, maybe like what you'd hope in 2 to 3 years kind of happened in the first year. How do you, I don't want to say temper expectations for yourself, but what does that look like goal-wise? Because I know, I'm sure in your mind there was probably some goals of wins and numbers of folks in stadiums and revenue and all that kind of stuff. One, like, I'm assuming all of those probably you probably hit them or exceeded all of those at this point in the year.
Yeah.
How do you readjust those mid-season with the team? What does that look like? How do you celebrate your wins with your team? And then how do you motivate your team and yourself to the next level?
Yeah. So I'll start with the goals of what we kind of had going into it. I think as a group, we had goals of just being relevant in late September.
Low standard league.
Be relevant in terms of let's give our chance to make the playoffs.
Right. Try and finish top 6.
Top 8, right?
Oh, 8,
get in top 8. Let's just get in. It's been a couple years since we've gotten to that point.
Right.
I will start off with saying this has probably been the most competitively equal USL championship season in the history of the league.
Yeah.
It is extreme. It's probably been the most challenging. It's very equitable across the board in terms of the balance of the schedule. And so knowing that going in, you're like, man, I got to play everybody in the East twice. I got to play everybody in the West once. Some of them are home. Some of them are away.
Yeah. Travels a lot.
Let's be realistic of like, let's put together, like, let's just give us our chance to be in playoff contention.
Yeah.
At
like
the end.
Could we maybe make them? Right.
Yeah. That is a very important thing to establish. I'm not someone who resets goals throughout the course of what we set as the goal from the beginning one. If we overachieved it or we overperforming that goal, that's great. Then next year when we set goals, let's make sure we're setting goals, for off of that. I think the hard part is when you start resetting goals. If you reset too high and you don't hit, now it doesn't look like, oh, well, we've come short on the goal we set. No, we've actually passed the goal.
That's right.
Let's stay focused on what it is, and then let's continue to ride that as long as we can ride that. And so, midway through the year, like, oh, we're actually pretty good.
Right.
And then we're at the point now where it's the greatest turnaround in USL history. We're one point away. So we have 9 potential points left. We either need a tie or a win, and it'll be the greatest turnaround in the history of the USL. So to your point of like, now let's skip. Like, how do you?
Where do you go from there?
Where do you go from there?
Where do you go from there?
Who knows? I think the really, really cool thing that I've experienced is when you have 3 individuals that are leading an organization and 3 are all gas pedal, you can achieve a lot.
You can go
at a warp speed that is probably different
Not normal,
than most.
Really? Yeah.
So you got Ben that's all gas pedal, you got myself that's all gas pedal, and you got Rob that's all gas pedal. And you take the three of us and merge us together, and it is like
You can get stuff done.
yeah, it's like nitrous in a car. The challenging thing is now, how do you continue to push each other and then continue to collaborate and make sure we're all on the same page? Because you've got ownership in an organization that's like, oh, we're good. The window's here.
Right.
Let's go for it. And you got Ben, who is on one side saying like, we still don't know if we're going to make the playoffs. And it's
Right.
like, no, Ben, like we
At this point, mathematically, we've qualified, buddy.
So
Right.
it's great in that sense because that's where my role comes in, is to be the one who's
The
got
liaison,
to
really, right.
and weave it all together. And that's where having someone like Rob in town locally that can meet and is around the team, knows what the organization's like, has been a huge conduit for me to just bounce ideas off. Here's what we're thinking. And then I can go back to Ben and be like, here's where we're at with stuff. And then go back to Rob and like, here's where we're at with things. And so I hate to say the word like over exceed.
Right.
Because I don't know if any of us really knew what was
Possible
this year. And so I think we have put smiles back on faces. We have
Become relevant.
We are so close to hosting a home playoff game, which for this town hasn't been done since 2017.
Be massive.
And what we've done for the ownership group is made it fun for them.
Yeah.
Because as you said, right, you're relying on so many different factors. There's not a major TV deal. And so those owners are investing their time, right, and their resources to make this, it's a passion project. And so for them, you want to be able to enjoy your passion.
Enjoy your
project.
passion, right? Yeah.
And winning makes it enjoyable.
Winning cures a lot.
So so now looking forward, it's like, what does the future look like? And
Well, I wonder too, it's similar to what you're talking about. I mean, obviously there's like numbers and goals, but you talked about in Tampa and here of like kind of a legacy.
yeah,
And leaving a legacy is the way that I think about it. But you said footprint, which I think is the same kind of mentality of what are you putting in place today so that next year you can continue on this run and more and further. And then when you leave at some point, you're not going to die here.
hopefully not.
Hopefully I can keep you here as long as possible. Then, like you said, is the team going to be set up in a way where they can function financially, can keep smiles on faces, remain relevant, all of those things, which I was joking low bar. I mean, kind of, but really like, that's really what you want. But in terms of passion project for an ownership group, you want championships, of course, but like, what do you really want is you want to impact your community, right? And the battery's been huge about that. We'll get that in a minute, but impact community, bring joy to people, and that's and remain relevant as part of all those things. So like how have you, and maybe it's more of reflecting afterwards, which is also a fine answer, but what have you been doing to prepare for next year, this year, from learnings from as you've been going forward, so that when you do leave, it's still ready to function?
I think the biggest thing, and I probably didn't do this well enough in Tampa, was trusting enough of the staff below. And I think here the autonomy that I've given everybody within the organization will make us better year in, year out. And that way, if there's something that happens at some point, right, I could be hit by a bus tomorrow, that the organization has the footprint to continue to go on. And I think you say goals of going forward, everybody wants to win a championship.
Right.
One team wins a championship.
Right.
That is an accomplishment. I don't think that's a goal.
Yeah.
The goal is to create a sustainable organization that can be here and relevant year in and year out, and not just hope we can be next year, right? It was really hard to recruit players this offseason. It is.
Right. It's going to be a lot easier this year.
It's not now, right? Like everybody wants to come to Charleston. So Charleston had great ownership group, great city, great stadium, not good on the field. So there's like, what is that? Players want to win.
Right.
And so now that piece has been
all those things plus the winning. It makes it
helps,
easier.
right? So it's now how do we create something going forward? And it's interesting. I try not to go too far back to Tampa all the time, But like we really studied the Louisville model in 2019. They had 7 players or 6 players that hit 100 games in their club. Tampa, I think, just passed 9 players since the time that like I started signing players there with Neil that just hit 100 games. And so like that to me is a goal of is how do we have continuity within this roster that we recruit players that play 30 games a year.
You have a core group.
They can be here for 4 to 5 years
Yeah.
to pass that 100-game mark. That's special.
Yeah.
And that shows like wins and losses are great in terms of what are like ways you can measure success.
Yeah.
But 100 games for something like that means that they are like one, a good player.
Healthy, they're good, their
Correct.
culture, they want to remain there, they love what they're
and those are the guys that are helping us recruit.
Yeah.
And that to me is a goal is how do we have someone that's in the front office and there's only one of me. We are second division soccer.
Right.
How do I have a sponsorship person that says, hey, I've now got an opportunity in Major League Soccer. I've got right. So that to me, like those are the goals of how are we progressing human beings on the field and off the field. And I'm not one that can sit here and say like, you can't leave. Right. Why are you leaving?
Right. Not personal.
No,
that's the opposite.
It should be my job is to help get them promoted. Yeah. So like, to me, those are the goals. Winning is just a byproduct of all those things.
I was going to say because it happens because of all those things.
That's
right?
correct.
At least for long term.
Correct. And that's where the experience that the fans have, the players have, the staff has, our corporate partners have, the ownership has. They all walk out and they say, do you remember 2023?
Right.
Do you remember 2024? I don't remember 2022. Great.
Yeah, good. Right. Exactly. Right? Yeah.
And that's what we want everyone to say is I remember that moment. I remember that moment that they hosted their first playoff game. I remember that moment that they had a crowd that was so energetic that I walked out of there thinking, man, this is awesome. Like, how do we continue to be a part of it? And that for me is the goal going forward is how do we make that sustainable for a long time?
Yeah, and with your staff, you touched on it a bit on it's not about keeping them and keeping knowledge so that they can't leave without you. It's the opposite, right?
Yeah.
So how does that fit into your I don't know, daily life, but your weekly kind of life in terms of growing people? We talk a lot about growth. We've already done that today. In their profession, not just in their day-to-day operations, but like expanding them as a human and as in their work.
So I think so. It's interesting. You a Ted Lasso fan?
Love it.
Do you have a favorite episode?
All of them.
Okay. So I have one.
I mean, the last one's awesome.
I have one. It's the darts episode. And it's a darts episode because I love the fact that they're sitting there and they're kind of joking around about playing a game of darts. And he's throwing it with his right hand. And then, you want to play a game of darts. And if I win, you can't come in the owner's box anymore or be around the club. But if you win, you, this is the owner of the team, you can pick the starting 11 for the last 2 games. In your life, there's one simple thing, is ask questions. And if he would have asked that question before being baited into that, he would have known that Ted was an avid dart player. But he didn't. And he pulls out his darts. And he's like, oh, I happen to carry my darts with me, right? This is the owner.
Right.
And he's like, oh. Ted goes, I happen to be left-handed.
Right.
And then, they progress the whole point. And then at the end, he, asks, what do I need to win? And, 2 bullseyes and a triple 20. And he gets 2 bullseyes and a triple 20. As he's doing it, he's explaining of be curious. And so that to me was just a very eye-opening moment for me in my career of be curious. And so whether it's a player or whether it's the owners or whether it's the head coach or whether it's you or whether it's my children or whether it's our staff, is be curious. What makes them motivated? What makes them tick? Who are they as human beings? Because how can I get more out of someone in life in general if I don't know how to connect with them, if I don't know how to understand what is important to them? Why are they having a bad day?
Yeah.
Is there something going on is it work? Is it off? And don't be afraid to ask those questions to show your support. So one of the biggest things that I do is I actually don't spend as much time in my office. Like, there's one that you can sit in your office and just be tunnel focused.
Yep.
And then, you get your job done. Task at hand is completed. Everyone had a good day. Move on. Right? There's no, you can come, you can sit amongst everyone, but still be task driven.
Yeah.
And move on. Or there's one who can sit down, engage. If the office is really quiet, why is it quiet?
Let's truly engage.
Put some music on.
Yeah.
Let's ask a silly question. Right? What's your favorite movie?
Mm-hmm.
Let's just take the entire office and reorganize it.
Yeah.
Like, because I think we as individuals become creatures of habit. And when it becomes too routine,
it's boring.
And right?
It.
Somebody who talks about growth mindset and helping individuals, you can't work for 8 hours straight.
No.
And so the way I look at it is, if it can't work for 8 hours straight and we're going to break it up anyways, let's figure out how we can constructively control those breaks to then when everyone goes back in, it's like, boom, I'm remotivated.
Yeah.
And so that for me is like, be curious every single day, go and understand who they are, understand who they are off the field. What is their family dynamics? What is their family life? What do they like to do for fun? What do they have coming up in their life? And then figure out how to connect with that. And that you hope that individual goes a little bit extra for you, or that player plays a little extra harder for you, or that fan feels a little bit more inclined to cheer a little louder, to get behind the group when they're down 1-0. And so that to me, like, I am in a people business, and how do I connect with people is the most important thing that I can do, while also trying to figure out all those other things. But that's what fills my bucket up. And that's what fuels me, so that I know I can be my best version or authentic version when I come to work every single day.
When it's like managing people and looking at everything as like relational versus transactional. And it's like you said, the person could be working for you and doing tasks and being super successful, and looking at them and just like, did you do it? Yes or no?
Yeah.
And that's a transaction that's happened.
Yeah.
Or relational of like, did you, yes or no? Why?
Yeah.
How can I help you? How can I support you?
Yeah.
You as a person, what's going on? What can we do to help you grow? And that's like the relationship community aspect we talk about with our life roles, of like being communal, being in the community and impacting the community. And from a work standpoint, the community is just who you work with.
Yeah.
And in life, it could be your neighborhood, or it could be whatever. And the Batteries had, Rob and the ownership group is like super intentional with being involved in the community. How has that impacted you, or how do you feel like you've impacted the Battery in that mission? One of the core pillars for them is being engaged in the community.
I mean, for us, it's give back. I mean, one of Ben's biggest pillars is, what are we doing to give back? You got to be high energy. You've got to be on every single day that you're there, but you also got to figure out, how are you giving back? And I think it's like, you got to have good individuals on the team side that understand what that looks like, understand what it's like to go do player appearances and go and read in libraries, or go to underprivileged areas and put on a clinic. And I think that's where we have the unique mechanism that, while we may be soccer and not everyone plays soccer, you're still a professional athlete.
Regardless.
You're still a professional sports organization.
Still have a platform.
Yeah. And so I think that's where we are unique in that sense. And I think that's what we have to do, from how does this all spin in a wheel that kind of comes back to you? How are we doing that and spending that time? Yesterday was really unique. We partnered with MSC, the Mediterranean Shipping Company, and they were doing a golf tournament. And one of the holes was a foot golf course. So we had players go out and donate their time, but also to help raise funds for Operation Smile, which is their charitable arm. And so it's not always like your traditional, I'm going to go to a player appearance and teach kids.
Right.
Like, these were adults
Unique
playing golf.
Yeah.
They had the opportunity on a foot golf course for one hole. They could either kick it themselves or donate to have the player kick it.
Do it. Oh, cool.
And if they beat the player, then there was a little bit extra. So, like, there's all these unique experiences, and it's how do we, I would say the hardest thing is the ones you have to say no to. Because they're all good. They're all good, and everybody is always coming for something. And so it's making sure that we're picking things that align with us.
With your values.
And making sure that we can maximize our reach, whatever initiatives that they have. Next week is our breast cancer awareness. Huge game. We are so close to sell out a week out, which is it's
really
amazing. But again, I think in anything that you partner with anybody, you have to be curious, and be curious in the sense of what is it that is important to them. Yeah. Breast cancer is really close with actually several of our players. Our ownership group have been impacted by it. I've been impacted by it from my grandmother. And so it's an initiative that's important. And I think it's easier to get bought into, right? I remember when we started talking about what's important to you, right? Community heroes.
Yeah.
I mean, our community hero initiative that we have with you has been unbelievable.
Really cool.
And when we started out day one, we put it out there and we didn't know how many community heroes we'd get. And it was like, all right, let's start filling this out. We now have applicants already lined up for next year. Yeah. So at that point, you're doing something right when you're 12 months out
and people are excited about it.
Mm-hmm. And that to us is extremely important is to know that give back element and making sure our staff are all finding initiatives that are important to them and volunteering at those things, because it can't just be about the players. It can't be about the ownership. It has to be about everybody in this organization.
To that, like, personal relationship.
Correct.
Thing, right. Yeah.
Find something you're passionate about. If building houses is passionate, then let's all go together as a group, or beach cleanups.
Whatever. Yeah.
Let's do those types of things.
How do you, as a father, as a spouse, how do you talk a lot about soccer?
Yeah.
It's obviously a lot of your life, and soccer's. I was in athletics for a long time, and then I worked in development, which is 24/7 essentially. How do you balance that out? Because that's just we talk about life roles, and that's one of the 7 is work. Obviously, as Lee Cohen, there's 6 other parts of you that exist.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's certain seasons of life or certain seasons of the season that you feel more in tuned with the whole self, and you see yourself getting kind of off kilter? Or how do you catch yourself when you're like, man, I am throwing myself too much into work and I'm not being the father I want to be, or I'm not taking care of myself mentally, or I'm not taking care of myself physically, my health, or whatever it is. Like, how do you balance it? And then when you don't, like, what do you do?
Yeah, it's interesting. So for 12 plus years in Tampa, I didn't. I didn't. And I think there's 2 things. I think we can go a little bit different on this. There's 2 things that I think we miss out on from the time we start grade school until the time we graduate. One, we don't teach individuals how to deal with finances in any way, shape, or form. Yeah. The other one is how to deal with challenging conversations or challenging moments in your life. Yeah. Mental health. Mm-hmm. And then we learn to just bury it. I think if we do those things at a younger age, both of them, I think we would be much better off and give us actually tools that when you graduate college, you can understand like what financial impacts mean in your life, good business decisions or good financial planning. And then you can have resources that when your boss says you've done a bad job, it's not personal.
Right.
It's just like, you've done a bad job, let's go figure out how do we fix it. Mm-hmm. Or how to have that crucial conversation. Like, no one teaches anybody how to have crucial conversations. And those are key things in life that you'll have to use forever. Mm-hmm. And so when my dad passed away, I buried a lot. Very sudden, and it was like I changed who I was as a person. Last year when I learned, it's funny, right? I started seeing a therapist. I thought it was great for me, and like everyone doesn't talk about but who can you talk to on a regular basis to just talk, to get your thoughts out of your head? Sometimes it's not good to bring those things home, right? Because everyone's dealing with something. So I am a firm believer in go speak to somebody. Yeah, and that's when I realized I was given the resources and the tools to figure out, as you mentioned, when I start to go a little bit unbalanced, how do I bring myself back? Yeah, and I'll never forget the first time I went and spoke. I want to become a better person. Mm-hmm. And the individual's like, you're already a better person. How do you become more authentic?
Interesting. Yeah.
How do you become more authentic? And so I think what I learned over the course of the last 18 months from the time I've started that process, the conversations were more like, how do I deal with my father's loss? How do I deal with him as a person? To now it's like, hey, what are we looking at going forward? Yeah. How do we do these types of things? This is what I have going on the team side. Maybe we've overachieved. Right. How do we temper that going forward? And so now I look at it as actually more of a business coach than anything. And so I try to find time. I include those in my life to before where I maybe wouldn't include like what I was thinking.
Right.
Not trying to fix everybody's problems.
Sure.
And so that to me has been the biggest thing is like, I feel it going off. I now have the resources and the tools to be present. And I think that's the biggest thing is like, yes, every Saturday there's a battery game.
Right.
On a Tuesday when I see the weather's bad, my emotions go like this of like, oh
no,
wait, we're going to have a rain delay.
Do? Right.
But it's how do I take the second back, really be present in the moment with my kids, be present in the moment with my wife, be a good brother, be a good son. Although I probably could work on that a little bit better.
No, well, you're speaking on, I mean, a lot of what we talk about, which is like two things, is like the tools you mentioned is like for us, it's like a framework. Like our framework, we think about as a tool for people to help cope with things, but also how do I become the person I want to be? Like exactly talking about a therapist. And that to me is like you said, coach, is, we can all do a fine job, or some of us can do really great jobs on our own. Yeah. But even when we do that, it tends to be in one area of our life or two. Yeah. And it takes a coach or a therapist or whomever to be able to say, but what about over here? What going over here? And that's like the accountability piece. The coach brings accountability from an objective perspective, right? Because I mean, of course they want the best from you, but they're not like setting goals for you. Correct. And they're not making sure you're becoming better, but they have the best interest in you. And that's the coaching aspect that we know is immensely important to help us reach our potential, help us reach who we want to be. Like you said, just go talk to someone. Yeah, and I think what you can do is we all think a conversation is going one way, and then you actually have the conversation. You're like, oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought. Right, it wasn't so Whereas bad. Talking through someone, you actually can preset how that conversation can go, and maybe talk about some of the points you have in life that you want to go in a direction, and then when you actually have the conversation, you actually know which way you're going. Yeah. But it is, I think I have felt the most authentic over the last year than I've ever had. It took me 40 years to figure it out. But hopefully I got another 40 plus years to go. But like you said, I think that's the learning aspect, right? Is like you could have just been like, nope, life's been good. It's fine. I'll continue suppressing. I'll keep moving forward. But it's like, there's still something missing and I need something. What is it? And you searched for it. You found it. And then the learning from that is, like you said, how do we move that down the funnel, down to the younger generation? Correct. How do we now say, okay, the learning for me is I needed help. Correct. I needed someone. I needed resources for finances or for whatever. Now what about my children? Correct. Or what about in the school? What about in X, Y, and Z? Yeah. And I think whether it's life or whether it's sports or whether it's friendships, family, like what kind of legacy can you leave in each of those markers? And at the end of the day, no one's going to sit down. Like in 10 years, you hope people will remember what happened in 2022 with the Charleston battery, but you hope they remember the conversations that they had. That's right. Or the moments that they went through and they shared with individuals that set up whatever that means. And that's how, like, if I can be that person for our organization or for anybody, it's what I feel like is how I can leave a legacy going forward. And it doesn't have to be related to what I did in my career as much as who I can be as a person. Yeah, and that's where it's like we have the framework. I got this framework, and then we also talk about I got this philosophy, and that's the philosophy, which is like you said, and is perfect. It's like, yeah, of course, our goal in some ways you wouldn't say it is like to win a championship, but really, what is the goal? Because when you reach it, then what, right? Correct. But if by reaching that means that you've become an organization or you've helped other people become the people they want to be, then it aligns with, like you said, legacy. It aligns with the organization and the person that you want to be. That's what really matters. That's the goal. And you can keep chasing after. We talked about like planning events. Yeah. Your like personal event is like the end of your life. Yeah. Right? And so if you're chasing these goals that align with that perfectly, then you're going to continue to find joy. Yeah. But if your goals are just goals. Yeah. Just the sake of win the championship. In 10 years, your kids seem like, Dad, remember that time you won the championship? Like, no, what you want them to be like is, remember that time in the championship and you were present at X, Y, and Z, and you helped that person. I remember you started the Community Heroes program. Like, how cool was that? Yeah. Like, that's what you want. Correct. It's interesting. So as someone who
obviously just went to Hawaii and spent some time over there. I had a speaker speak to us, extremely brilliant individual. He was one of the first in the military that was training dolphins and whales to basically go out search for, this was during like the Cold War time period, search for whatever they were searching for on the bottom floor, come back and, so extremely smart, right?
Yeah.
And he told the story because they were based in Hawaii and the road to Hana. And it's a journey, right? It's a very long journey. And he tells a story and he's like, we get the kids in the car, we pack our sandwiches, and you start this winding tour. I've never gone on it. Did you go when you?
We didn't.
My brother went when he was there, and I told him the story before he went. And it's like life, right? So you talk about you have your end point of birth to whatever it is. And on this journey to Hana, he said they didn't look at anything. It was just hands on the wheels. Just go. Let's get to the top.
Yep.
And what he said when he got to the top, he missed everything along the way, and he correlated it to life.
Yeah.
And so that is, again, stuff I've learned over the last year is how do we enjoy who's in our presence,
right?
What we're going through, and be able to take it all in and live in the moment,
right?
Versus what's the end goal. So you're right. Winning a championship, it's a
task, marker, right? It's a
but
milestone.
It's not like I think you said it great. Well, if you win it this year, what is it? Like I got to do it next year. And if you don't do it next year, does that mean you failed?
Right.
No. It is that marker that you have to create and enjoy it till you get to that point. Enjoy living in it.
Yeah. No, and especially I think as parents, like helping our children in that process.
Yeah.
Is important because as adults even it's hard because we're like there's 45,000 things that have to happen for you to like get to soccer practice after school. And it's just sometimes it's about that, but like taking the moment to stop and like and that's the hardest for me. I think it's hard for me. My wife is like infinitely better than me and she's taught me so much in this, but it's like I'll be like, yeah, we gotta go. I'm freaking out. And it ends up being like, was the minute that we got there earlier, like really worth it? Like, was it really worth the frustration? Was it really like, no. And like, it's a good reminder always of like, it's that in those moments. So I want my children to see me freaking out and I want them to be stressed out and I want them to think that life is centered on that. Or like, do I want them to see how I handle frustration, and like learn from that. And, I don't succeed at it all the time. I'm getting better at it for sure.
But you probably realize it when you're in the moment though.
Always.
You like notice it. You're like, man, I can feel what I'm doing.
But I only notice it now because my wife has brought it up. Right. But if she never did, I'd just be like, this is how I spoke. Like, this is how I'm operating. But because she does, I'm like, why am I freaking out right now? And it's great. Like, probably shouldn't be. But that's like the learning, right? Like that's me growing through my wife being honest and helping me be like, come on. Like
it's so funny because I used to, my daughter, she'd cry over something small. And I would tell her, like, nobody cares that you cry in life. Like, just like stop.
Just stop. Get over it. What are you doing?
And then my business coach was like, well, in that moment for her, it's really important.
Super important.
So like, there's a better way to go about it, right?
There's a better conversation you can have.
Hey, it's okay to feel that emotion.
Now.
But like, why are you feeling it? And I've realized like all I was doing before was just making it
causing
worse.
it worse. It's causing more crying.
Now it's actually, she's like, oh, okay, I understand why. And like we moved past it.
Yeah.
But it is challenging because I'm probably very similar. Like, we got to go out the door so we can get there 5 minutes early. Because if you're not 5 minutes early, you're 10 minutes late.
Well, that was the coaching. Like, I will never forget freshman year of college. I showed up at the baseball field 30 minutes early. My coach was like, where have you been? I was like, well, I had class and I got lunch and I changed.
Still early.
And he's like, freaked out on me. He's like, if you're not here an hour early, you're late. I'm like, okay. I had to go run all this punishment. It's like for me now, like being late is like I'm so terrified about being late from sports.
Yeah, same.
Same thing. Yeah, like if you're early, you're not this much early, you're late.
Yeah.
And so I'm the same with my children, which is a good thing to teach, but also the way I go about it always isn't the best.
I did this week. My wife happens to be out of town and kind of going through that same process. Like, we got to go. We get out the door. My daughter I asked her about the book that she just finished. I didn't realize she was going to tell me it for 30 minutes.
Right. You're like, gosh, what did I get myself into?
But like the moment that when she was done and told me, like I saw the joy on her face.
Like, that's why.
To be able to say like, oh, like I told you about this book. Meanwhile, inside I was just like, oh boy, how much longer? Like, we got to get out the door.
Yeah.
But it is, right? It's having that ability to step back and say.
And for me personally, I was through one of my, like through our framework, one of the values is family. And one of my like vision statements is like in dream goals, I want my children and their children to be coming to my house regularly. So I could be, if we're not in the same place, it can be yearly, whatever, and cooking with me. Like, that's what I want. I want like my family. And then you back that up and it's like, if I'm yelling at them to get out the door early all the time, they're not going to come hang out with me when I'm at Grand. You know what I mean? So I'm like, it reminds me in those moments, like, if I want to be that person, what am I doing today? Because they're not going to all of a sudden just like love me again, or want to be around me and spend time with me. So like now I intentional about spending time with my daughter cooking, and I bring my son in that, all those kind of things. But it's the who we want to be thing, and that's from the framework perspective. We look at it's these values and vision statements, and if those little goals, the goal for me then is just to be patient right now with my daughter. If those aren't aligning with that, then what are they? Yeah. It's just like, it will never happen.
And then what are you teaching them? And they carry it over.
Right. Well, Lee, it's been a joy, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.